without the amazing people that are willing to come and put up with us on a daily basis because we're hard to deal with.
At first glance, Kilcher seemed to have it all: freedom, a close-knit family, and a lifestyle most only dream about. But over time, something shifted. Fans of Alaska, the last frontier, began noticing his absence, a quieter presence, and a change in his overall energy. What started as small signs slowly became impossible to ignore. Was it the toll of years spent working in harsh conditions? Tensions behind the scenes that never made it on air? Or perhaps the weight of maintaining a picture-perfect frontier life finally became too heavy? The deeper you look, the more it points to something deeper: burnout, emotional strain, and a quiet unraveling that may have been happening long before anyone realized. Born on March 6, 1983, Eivin Kilcher is part of the third generation to grow up on the family's rugged homestead just outside Homer, Alaska. His connection to the land runs deep. This isn't just where he lives, it's where his story began. The homestead itself was first carved out of the Alaskan wilderness back in the 1940s by his grandparents, Yule and Ruth Kilcher, who made the incredible journey from Switzerland to Alaska, chasing a dream of freedom and simplicity. Yule Kilcher, originally named Julius Jacob Kilcher, was born in Switzerland in 1913. Even as a teenager, he had a curious spirit and a deep interest in anthropology. At just 16, he was hitchhiking through Europe and North Africa, learning from different cultures how to live simply. He picked up skills like log cabin building from Swedish carpenters and the mountain dwellers of the Carpathians, skills that would later become essential to his life in Alaska. His first trip to Alaska was in 1936, and he instantly fell in love with the untamed wilderness. By 1940, he had returned to settle there for good. A year later, Ruth Helen Weber joined him. Originally trained as an opera singer and raised in Pratten, Switzerland, Ruth married Yule just 3 days after arriving in Alaska. Whether they were longtime sweethearts or barely knew each other before the wedding remains up for debate. What's certain is that they dove headfirst into frontier life. The government granted Yule 160 acres, provided he lived on it, built a structure, and planted a crop. In 1944, Yule and Ruth moved to an old fox farm outside Homer with breathtaking views of Kachemak Bay. Their life was as rugged as it gets: no electricity, no running water, and a one-room cabin to call home. It wasn't until 1952 that electricity finally reached the homestead. In the meantime, they lived off the land, hunting, fishing, raising livestock, and growing their own food. Yule documented their early homesteading life using a 16mm camera, capturing both film and slides. His work became the basis for 2 documentaries, A Pioneer Family in Alaska and The Last Frontier, which he screened across Europe between 1947 and 1958, offering audiences a glimpse into the raw beauty and hardship of Alaskan frontier life. As the Kilcher family grew, so did the homestead. Yule and Ruth went on to raise 8 children, including Otto and Otz, names that fans of the Kilcher legacy will instantly recognize. Otto, though not the oldest, quickly stood out for his adventurous spirit and hands-on curiosity. Growing up surrounded by wild canyons, forests, and mountains gave him a strong bond with nature. But it was his fascination with machinery and fixing things that truly set him apart. That same inventive spirit flowed naturally to On. Life on the homestead meant learning to be resourceful from the start. There was no other option. While most kids were imagining adventures, Eivin was living one every day, surrounded by Alaska's wild beauty. The forest, the mountains, and the rhythm of the seasons weren't just scenery. They were his teachers. From an early age, he was out hunting, fishing, building, and doing his part to help the Kilcher homestead run smoothly. The knowledge he carries today, how to survive, how to build, how to live in harmony with nature, wasn't taught in a classroom. It was passed down generation by generation as a way of life. But On didn't just inherit his family's grit, he brought his creativity into the mix. The guy has a serious talent for innovation. Give him a pile of scrap metal and leftover lumber, and chances are he'll whip up something useful, whether it's a smokehouse or a handmade boat. When it comes to food, he doesn't rely on stores. He grows his vegetables and herbs, catches fish, and hunts game. He's completely self-sufficient in a way most people can only imagine. One of his earliest brushes with independence came when he was just a kid, maybe around 8 or 10. His dad handed him the keys to what was likely a 1983 Subaru DL wagon and gave him a crash course in driving. Literally, the lesson was unconventional: keep it in gear, steer, and if you're about to hit something, turn off the ignition. That's it. No clutch, no brakes, no one else in the car, just Eivin and a whole lot of trust from his father. It was terrifying, thrilling, and unforgettable all at once. At just 15, On made his first big investment, a beat-up 1986 Subaru GL station wagon he bought from his dad for $700. It didn't run, not even close, but that was the point. Fixing it became his first real dive into the world of mechanics. To pay for it, he hustled around the homestead, taking on whatever jobs needed doing, mending fences, hauling gear, even straightening out old nails so they could be used again. It was hands-on, boots-in-the-mud kind of work. That old Subaru didn't last forever. It eventually got wrecked. But what On learned from it stuck with him for life. In his 20s, instead of heading to college, On chose a path that took him far from Alaska but still close to the raw edges of life. He spent summers fighting wildfires, earning money in the most dangerous conditions, and used his winters to travel the world. For him, that was a better education than any classroom could offer. One of the most memorable adventures of his life came at 22 when he and a close friend traveled across Indonesia by motorcycle. Starting in Bali, they rode over 2,000 kilometers east, island hopping on public ferries and weaving through coastal roads, steep mountain passes, and endless stretches of jungle. The freedom, the heat, and the scenery left a lasting impression. He recalls the coastline of Sumbawa in particular, a 500 kilometers stretch of pure beauty with winding roads, glistening waters, and towering mountains. It wasn't about speed. It was about soaking in the experience, wearing nothing but t-shirts and shorts, feeling the warmth of the tropics on their skin. But not every moment was idyllic. On the island of Flores, a serious crash left his friend with a badly burned leg. Deep in the jungle and far from help, they had no choice but to head back toward civilization. The most harrowing moment came one night while riding through massive rice paddies in pitch-black darkness. Rain poured from the sky and lightning cracked all around them. They were riding on an elevated road, the highest point around and a prime lightning target. To stay safe, they tucked in behind a semi-truck, using it as a makeshift lightning shield, counting the minutes until they reached the safety of town. Despite the fear, it's one of On's most vivid and treasured memories. Back home in Alaska, On carried those lessons with him as he built his life on the very land his grandfather once settled. He started with just a single cabin and gradually expanded it into a full homestead with fields, gardens, and all the essentials for a self-reliant lifestyle. And he wasn't alone. His partner through it all has been Eve. Eve and On's story stretches back to childhood. They both grew up on neighboring farms near the Kilcher homestead. Eve split her time between her dad, who lived near On's family in Homer, and her mom, who lived in Gustavos near Glacier Bay National Park. When Eve moved in with her dad full-time, she and On ended up going to the same high school. They graduated together in 2001, and what started as friendship eventually turned into love. In August of 2011, they married in a nature-themed ceremony, fitting for a couple so rooted in the land. While On focuses on building and hunting, Eve is the steady force behind the homestead's flourishing garden. Alaska's growing season is brutally short, barely 4 months. But Eve makes every day count. Through careful planning and relentless effort, she manages to grow a wide range of vegetables, transforming even the smallest patches of soil into something useful. When harvest time arrives, she's there canning, preserving, and prepping, doing everything she can to ensure the family is ready for the long, harsh winter. But what they didn't see coming was the outside world, ready to knock and change everything. Alaska, America's largest and wildest state, has always carried an air of mystery. That's exactly why they call it the last frontier. So much of the land remains untouched, and naturally, that sparked curiosity. It didn't take long for TV producers to realize that viewers were fascinated by people actually living off the grid in such a remote place. Discovery Channel, always on the lookout for compelling Alaska stories, eventually stumbled upon the Kilcher family. In a twist that could only happen in the digital age, a producer reached out to On through Facebook, hoping to see if the family would be interested in being on a reality show. And just like that, Alaska, the Last Frontier was born. The show focused on multiple members of the Kilcher clan, Otts and his wife Bonnie, Otts Lee and Jane, Otto and Charlotte, and of course, On and Eve. Cameras followed them through their daily routines, all centered around the homestead life. Each summer, they tackled 3 vital jobs to prepare for the brutal Alaskan winter: stockpiling firewood, winterproofing their homes, and securing enough food for themselves and their animals. Summers were no vacation. They were a race against time. What set the show apart was its deep dive into real-life homesteading. However, it wasn't without its critics. Some viewers felt the series exaggerated the survival aspect, especially when it dramatized everyday tasks like hunting or chopping wood as life-or-death missions. After all, the Kilchers weren't completely isolated. They could always head into the nearby town of Homer if things got tough. Still, for many, the charm of the show wasn't in whether every threat was real, but in how it showcased a way of life rooted in resilience, tradition, and self-sufficiency. The series made its debut on December 29, 2011, and wasted no time introducing audiences to the family and their unique lifestyle. Otz and Otto took center stage, sharing stories about their father, Yule, a Swiss immigrant who settled in Alaska in pursuit of true freedom. Yule envisioned a life far from the modern world's chaos, one where his family could live off the land and survive on their own terms. The early episodes leaned heavily into that idea. The very first season, simply titled Alaska, had just 3 episodes, but it made a strong impression. It followed the family on a tense final hunting trip before winter, made even more urgent after losing some of their cattle to bear attacks. Episode 2 saw them rushing to get winter ready. And in Episode 3, the drama escalated with a search for a missing cow and calf in the snow-covered wilderness. With the show's popularity growing, Discovery brought it back in October 2012 with a full 15-episode season. The second season opened with a bang. Otto faced tough conditions and food shortages while trying to help out a fellow homesteader. Once winter eased, the family got back to work milling wood, hunting, and fishing, especially for king salmon. An, who joined the series right at the beginning, quickly became a fan favorite. It took him some time to adjust to being on camera, but he grew to love the opportunity the show gave him to educate others about sustainability and self-reliant living. For him, the show was a platform to share his broad range of skills from carpentry to mechanics to furniture making. He often emphasized that if he could learn to do these things, others could too. Feedback from viewers proved that message was landing. Fans regularly approached the Kilchers or sent messages saying the show had inspired them to build backyard chicken coops or start vegetable gardens. That kind of reaction meant the world to the family. Because ultimately that's what Alaska, the last frontier, was all about, inspiring others to embrace self-sufficiency and reconnect with nature. Part of what draws viewers in is the striking contrast between their own lives and the wilderness the Kilchers call home. While most people navigate city streets and constant noise, the Kilchers live in a place where nature sets the pace and civilization feels worlds away. Eivin believes that's a big part of why the show strikes such a chord. It taps into something deeply human. Still, as with any reality series, there's always some curiosity about how much of it is truly unscripted. The show leans into the tension of beating the clock before winter hits, and the ever-present risk of running low on supplies. Otto's well-known habit of putting things off has led to some real nail-biters, like the time he and An got stuck overnight after misjudging the tide. Moments like that don't just add suspense, they reveal the very real challenges of life off the grid and sometimes the friction it creates between father and son. When Season 6 premiered in October 2015, it offered viewers yet another glimpse into a way of life that feels a world apart from modern convenience. Out on the Kilcher homestead, there's no indoor plumbing, no quick trips to the store, just the daily grind of hunting, growing, and gathering to keep food on the table. That down-to-earth lifestyle eventually inspired a new project. After being approached by a literary agent, Otz and Eve released a cookbook in 2016 titled Homestead Kitchen. While Otz supplies the meat and wild ingredients, he openly credits Eve for doing the real culinary magic. According to him, roughly 80% of the recipes are her own creations, many developed from scratch. The cookbook isn't just a list of meals, it's a peek into their way of life. They wanted to answer the countless questions they received from fans about cooking on the frontier. For them, this book became a way to share their world more intimately than the show ever could, filled with personal stories and family photos that highlight their deep love for homesteading. And no, they're not professional chefs. And that's exactly the point. The recipes are simple, practical, and designed for real people who don't want to use every pot in the kitchen after a long day outside. For beginners, it's a perfect entry point. And for seasoned cooks, it might feel familiar, but that's where the charm lies. Because what Homestead Kitchen truly offers isn't just food, it's a celebration of Alaska. Many of the ingredients are local to their region, and Eve intentionally included items that might be hard to find elsewhere to encourage readers to explore their local ecosystems. It's a cookbook that doubles as an invitation to get outside and get creative. What really stands out in the book are the little stories tucked between recipes, like the struggle to keep chickens safe from predators or a mishap with a beehive that ended in laughter. Of course, some parts lean into poetic territory, like comparing digging up potatoes to discovering Spanish treasure. But even those sweet, overly polished moments are grounded in real experience and love for the land. Sure, not every part of the book feels raw and unfiltered. Some stories come off a bit too dreamy, but overall it's a sincere attempt to bottle up the joy, sweat, and occasional chaos of living off the grid. It's less about high-level cuisine and more about the heart behind it, growing, foraging, and cooking in a way that feels authentic and connected to the earth. In a memorable 2017 episode of Alaska, The Last Frontier, fans got a closer look at one of Kilcher's coolest builds, his custom boat, the Fair North Rose. This wasn't just a typical fishing boat tucked away in Homer. It was a rugged 32.5-foot long, 10-foot wide landing craft built for serious Alaskan adventures. Sure, not every part of the book feels gritty or unfiltered. Some moments lean a little dreamy, but at its core, it's a heartfelt effort to capture the joy, the hard work, and the occasional chaos that comes with living off the grid. It's not about fancy cuisine. It's about cooking with purpose, growing your own food, foraging what the land gives, and turning it into meals that feel rooted in something real. And speaking of real, fans got a first-hand look at Kilcher's craftsmanship in a memorable 2017 episode of Alaska, The Last Frontier. That's when he unveiled one of his most impressive builds, his custom-made boat, the Fair North Rose. But this wasn't your average fishing boat bobbing around Homer. This was a 32.5-foot long, 10-foot wide landing craft built tough for serious Alaskan journeys. With twin 225 horsepower outboard motors, this thing had plenty of muscle to cut through rough waters. And inside, surprisingly cozy. Designed with extended trips in mind, it had comfortable living quarters and could hit a top speed of 40 miles per hour, cruising steadily at 25. With its massive 250-gallon fuel tank, it could travel roughly 425 miles on a full tank, a real game-changer for off-grid excursions. But that wasn't the only mechanical marvel tackled that year. Around the same time, he took on a passion project that hit a bit closer to home, restoring a mid-80s Subaru Brat. Now, this wasn't just a fixer-upper for fun. This was the car had dreamed about owning since he was a kid, and he went all in to make it his own. The Bratlie became a standout on the homestead, not just for its looks, but for its practicality. It could hit the trails just as easily as it could drive into town for groceries. It was, as saw it, the original side-by-side ATV, but street legal. While most people called it a car, the lifted stance and all-terrain upgrades gave it the feel of a small, fuel-efficient truck. It was nimble, capable, and perfect for life in Alaska. Then came 2019, and Alaska, The Last Frontier, delivered one of its most unforgettable moments. Brothers An and Levi Kilcher took on a cliffside climb that looked like something straight out of Free Solo. Only this time, it was real life in the Alaskan wild. They had ropes. They had helmets. So, it wasn't exactly reckless, but it was still a nail-biting moment that set the tone for the season. This wasn't about chasing adrenaline. It was about survival. The brothers were on a mission to reach a new hunting ground, one that could help put food on the table for the entire Kilcher family. But first, they had to conquer that towering rock face. During the climb, Levi called out to An as they studied the towering wall in front of them, one they had bolted over a decade earlier. Some of the bolts were still holding strong, but others had rusted. They'd never made it to the top back then. But now, with a clear goal in mind, they were determined to finish what they started and reach the high-altitude terrain known as Goat Country. For An, this wasn't just about climbing or hunting. It was about reconnecting with his brother and their shared past. Moments like this were what they used to do all the time, and he saw this as a way to create memories that would stick for a lifetime. Levi, on the other hand, kept a level head. He acknowledged the risks ahead, knowing that the higher sections of the climb were the most technical and the most dangerous. Outside of these wild adventures, Eivin Kilcher wears many hats. Over the years, he's worked as a reality TV personality, a writer, a firefighter, a machinist, and a welder. He's known for operating excavators and backhoes around his homestead, expanding and shaping the land around his family cabin. But at his core, Eivin is all about the subsistence lifestyle. Instead of planting crops, he's out tracking moose, bear, and deer, or casting lines for salmon, halibut, and trout. He gathers clams, mussels, berries, seaweed, and mushrooms, always with the mindset of using everything and respecting every living thing he harvests. That deep connection to nature shapes how he feeds and protects his family. His wife, Eve, brings her strengths to the table. She's all about foraging, gardening, and preserving the food they grow and gather. Together, Eivin and Eve are a modern-day team, putting a fresh spin on the old-school ways of living off the land. Despite their off-grid lifestyle, they stay connected with fans through social media, regularly posting updates, family moments, and behind-the-scenes looks at life on the homestead. And as of late 2022, Eve began offering personalized copies of her cookbook, hinting at a possible shift toward writing full-time and maybe even stepping back a little from reality TV. The couple also launched a website where they share more of their passions, many of which don't always make it into the episodes, but are every bit as essential to who they are.